Good evening. Welcome back to Orange Hot Reviews. Sorry, folks, just had to, especially for this one. Um, Hope you're all doing well. So yeah, uh, episode 84, mystery reviews, and this movie I gave hints of vampire love, and I do believe I did give another hint, which was a few other hints actually. The final hint being, let me check Twitter. But while I wait, hello to everybody in the chat. New challenger appears. Nearzoic joins in Orange Stream. How you doing, Nearzoic? Good to see you. And Vangia, good to see you. So yes, let's see here. Last hint on Twitter, because I usually give the hints on Twitter, was, which I also believe nobody saw because, well, Twitter sucks and they like to shadow ban people. Yes, the final hint was the Janissaries. So, this movie, Vampire Love, many people might guess Bram Stoker's Dracula. They would be close, but no cigar. The movie that I am doing was done in 2014, and it does involve Dracula, but it revolves around the origins of Dracula and the Janissary Corps that he was a part of, as well as his kingdom of Wallachia. And it is and his love for his son and wife. The movie is Dracula Untold. Now, this movie is actually quite a good one. I actually really do enjoy it. It got blasted on Rotten Tomatoes for all sorts of weird, stupidity stuff. But then again, who really cares about what Rotten Tomatoes thinks, you know? Hey, Cult Classic Cage, good to see you. So yes, Luke Evans, and a lot of people don't realize this about Luke Evans, is he's gay, and he plays Dracula. But Dracula's not gay; he's heterosexual. So it's not woke. It's just a gay actor playing a role and doing a great job at it. You know, it's kind of like how Ian McDermott, or not McDermott, but Ian McKellen said that actors should not be limited to the roles just because of their sexual preferences, you know? And I think that he made a good point there. So, with Dracula Untold, this movie does bear historical accuracy a little bit because they wanted to hold to the historical events that were going on at the time of the 1400s, which was the Turkish invasion into Europe. And they had to go through Wallachia. And, well, Dracula, or Vlad Tepes, was apparently one of the Turks, or was taken by the Turks, at least in this story. And then he repelled the Turks, and he also impaled a lot of people. Yeah, Vlad the Impaler, which comes to play in this movie. Now, this movie was done in 2014, starring Luke Evans as Vlad, Sarah Gadon as Morena, his wife, Dominic Cooper from MCU fame as Howard Stark plays the antagonist Mehmed II, and Charles Dance plays the Master Vampire. We have other people who play in the movie as well, but none of real or of any real repute. So this movie does have romance into it. It is about the tragic love and but also love for one's nation and what he would do to protect it. Believe me, folks. Believe me when I say, if there was any way that I would be able to take on a curse to fix the problems in my nation and I only had 3 days to fucking do it, you're damn right I'd do it. Because right now, shit is fucked right now. But that's all I'm getting into. Orange Hat question from Neozoic, who has been very active with providing nice little backgrounds and whatnot. Was Dracula Untold was supposed to be the first movie to start the whole, well, Dead Dark universe before changing it to the Mummy? You know what? I honestly think that would have been a good idea. I honestly think that would have been the best plan for them to do that, because by doing that, you've started the monsters off in the 1400s, and you've then then you bring forward to the modern day, which this movie does have a modern bit of acting in the end. I always liked Luke Evans' actor. He once said in an interview his dream role was to play James Bond. Honestly, I think he could do a good James Bond. Luke Evans is a good actor. A lot of people don't realize just how good. He played one hell of a villain in the Fast and Furious movies. And folks, when I do say he is one hell of a villain in that, or I do like the Fast and Furious movies to a degree, that was one movie I really did like, because Luke Evans played one hell of a great role. He is a good actor. A lot of people don't realize that about him. He's one of the underrateds. But yes, to answer Neozoic, I do believe that they would have actually done a better job starting or having this movie start off the Dark Universe than the Mummy movie. Honestly, I think they would have had a more successful run if they had. So, getting into it, the film begins with narration of Dracula's son Ingerus, covering how the Turks enslaved Transylvania and Transylvanian children to put into the Janissary Corps. Now, folks, the Janissaries of the Turkish army are real. That is historical fact. And the Turks raised child soldiers to kill without complaint, to die without question. And believe me, it was one of the more heinous things they ever did, or that some people did, to force children as young as 10 years old to fight in wars. 10 years old, folks. Let that sink in. And how his son, or his father, Vlad Tepes, or Vlad Dracula, was one of them, and how he served the Turkish army faithfully and was then known as Vlad the Impaler, as he impaled, or armies would run from him if they saw him coming. And he was the son of the dragon, as they called him. And then I do love this scene, the whole scene with Ingerus covering it. It's all frozen in time, and you get a 3D walk around through that scene, which is also pretty cool. Oh, we're talking about not Castlevania, the movie. How you doing, Epi? Good to see you. I always like what I like about Luke Evans is he kind of reminds me of Clark Gable, and he looks, and he's ugly, you can see, and he has Clark Gable mustache and the ears, yeah. Also, we have a member of our YouTube community that kind of looks like Luke Evans. He's friends with Rosetta Allen. He's a good kid too. Will, his name is. But yes, then we cut to Vlad investigating a Turkish scout's helmet that was found in a river in Transylvania. Now, it was found by a gypsy, one of those gypsy-looking motherfuckers, and the helmet had claw marks in it. And Vlad's like, if the Turks are here, or if this was a scout, they are never alone. They would have a scouting party. And then we get the establishment of Broken Tooth Mountain, which does kind of look quite like a broken tooth. He then goes up to investigate with with two of his men. And we get the first monster action Now, Charles Dance as the monster or the master vampire, the monster of Broken Tooth, is done extremely well. When he starts slaughtering people, and then the way they show how quick he moves and his acting in this movie, Charles Dance, I have never seen him do a bad role. There are several actors I have said about that, or said that about. Christopher Lee, Gary Oldman, Charles Dance. Even in the Underworld movies that he played in, he did great in his roles that he played. He played them. The dude is a theater taught actor, I do believe, and he does it so freaking well. And he plays this one no differently. He does, or it was a great role. Now, he ends up slaughtering the two guys with Dracula or with Vlad, and Vlad takes a swipe and gets knocked out. Knocked backward, and he makes it to the edge of the cave where the master vampire cannot cross. And he gets some of the blood on his sword. Now, as the master vampire retreats, you then see him, you see the blood just evaporating off of the blade. That effect where it just burns and evaporates off the blade in the sunlight is so freaking awesome, man. Like, seriously cool effects. So, let me see what the chat's saying right now. How you compare Luke's Dracula from Untold with Dracula such as Gary Oldman, Sir Christopher Lee, Bela Lugosi. First off, Bela Lugosi and Christopher Lee are always going to have legendary status when it comes to vampire acting. They did the typical vampire, or the typical stereotypical vampire action, where they are hypnotizing and with the voice. But also, Christopher Lee had his own legendary freaking voice. I mean, that man has one voice that can do 1,000 characters. So, Gary Oldman, who freaking showed such dedication by freaking shaving his head all the way up here to do the role of Dracula, or old Dracula, was great. That movie, I do also believe I covered in this, or in the mystery reviews. Gary Oldman was a great actor. The only problem with that movie was hiring Keanu Reeves to play Jonathan Harker. John Rhys Meyers, Luke Evans, Carl Urban are all the same person. They're all my man. Happy. Charles Dance's greatest performance was Last Action Hero, Changed My Mind. Yep, he did a good job in that one as well. Hands down. Charles Dance is classically trained. He said once in an interview that Peter Cushing said, "The best advice I can give you, always act and everything like we're going to win an Academy Award." And you know what? He does that. Honestly, Charles Dance, whenever he is given a role, just give him the fucking award that goes with it, because he deserved it. He's one of those that deserves it. No, see, or don't have to fact check that. You could just tell it's true the moment you hear it. Yeah, that is true. Now, getting back to it, he then rides. A lot of people think he rides back to his castle, but he doesn't. He actually rides to a monastery, the Kozia Monastery, where he talks with the monks who go over the legend of the vampire, from the Greek word pai, to drink. And they all woke up 2 nights ago from the same identical dream. And they show the drawings of the demonic entity that made a bargain with a man, played by Charles Dance. And he summoned the demon, and the demon tricked him. He gave him the strength of 100 men, the speed of a falling star, and all that and heightened senses, also the thirst for blood. And he bound him to a cave, the cave on Broken Tooth Mountain. And he is left there until somebody comes along who is worthy to carry that curse. So yeah, he's like, and Vlad tells him, he's like, my people have enough to fear with the Turks, or with the Turks' possible return. I need you to keep this secret and do not tell anyone of this. And so then he returns home with the weight of the Turkish army most likely coming to his land because, well, the Turks want all lands. This was during the Ottoman Empire. And before I go further, there is an effect of the Master Vampire, how his vision is pulse based or even echolocation based, so to speak, how he can see the pulse and blood flow of prey that has blood. That is also a great effect in this movie. So we then see Morena and Icarus playing and waiting for Vlad, and Vlad arrives. Now, this was also during a time when Wallachia was also transitioning into the Christian faith, where they started to worship Christ. And I do like how they established that. It's because it's like, this is the year of our risen Lord, and that's called Easter. So it's showing that they are learning to be a part of this new religion that is now taking over Europe, but is also being pushed out by the Turks, who are more of the Muslim persuasion. This movie actually pissed me off at first. The trailer had so many cool scenes that made it seem so much darker than, or that never made it to the final cut, or even deleted scenes. Yeah, that is one of the downsides to this film. It really did have a misdirected trailer. It's amazing to think that Charles Dance's character is supposed to Caligula. In the original script, it was meant to definitely be the most evil Roman emperor. Nice. So, continuing on, let me just make sure that certain things are taken care of here. There we go. Internet problems. Can you all hear me very well? I'm not having any internet problems. Just let me know. So, yep, we get to Easter, and they're having their nice celebration, and the next day, well, the Turks arrive. Hamza Bey arrives, and he's like, well, we're here for the Sultan's tribute. The Sultan's tribute is a chest of silver. And he's like, did you not think that we wouldn't notice some of our scouts going missing? And Dracula tells him, he's like, I didn't kill him. I didn't, what? Oh, well, I'm kidding. I can hear you. Okay, good. Can be weird, choppy every now and then, but fine for the most part. Thank you, Epi. More detailed like this allows me to know, because it was showing some choppiness on my side. So we get the scene between the Turks and Hamza Bey, always goading Vlad, pushing his buttons, telling him, I know it still lives deep inside you, Lord Impaler, saying this in Turkish tongue. And you see the other Turkish, sorry if you're hearing anything outside. We have assholes outside who love to play in the snow with fucking snowmobiles. And anyway, you see another one moving around, checking out the women and also the children. I mean, it shows you that some of these Turkish soldiers do have some deviance in them, sexual deviance in them. And one of them grabs, or his name's Bright Eyes, and after Hamza Bey is told to go, he's like, all right, or take the tribute and leave, he turns around and he's like, right, the Sultan said, or the Sultan has commanded 1,000 boys for his Janissary Corps. And this pisses off everybody in the hall, which is citizens and whatnot of Wallachia. And they're all like, no, never. Nope, we're not doing that. And even Vlad tells him the Janissary Corps was disbanded by the last Sultan. He gave up that practice years ago. I was the last of the Janissaries, essentially, is what he was saying. Well, there is a small extended bit to it that I remember where he says this, or his son revived the Janissary Corps. And he says 10, or those of you 15 years or older will be made ready for the siege or the Battle of Hungary. And those of you 10 year or 14 or 10 to 14 will be made ready for the siege of Vienna. This dude he's not taking no for an answer. And then you see Bright Eyes, the Turkish that was known as Bright Eyes, grab one of the boys and says they're soft, but they'll do. And the boy's father grabs the Turkish's arm, or the Turkish scout's arm, and he is about to chop off that guy's arm, but Vlad grabs him and he's like, do you know who I am? And the Turkish response, he's like, I know who you were. Basically saying, you're not what you used to be. You're not Vlad the Impaler. You're Vlad the Wuss, basically. Orange, thoughts on the original plan that Sam Worthington, the actor who played, I remember, I know who Jack Sully is, was going to play Dracula, but replaced with Luke Evans because schedule issues. It would have been interesting. I'm having a hard time picturing Sam Worthington doing it. I really am. I'm having a hard time picturing him playing Dracula. I'm just not seeing it. I'm having a very, very hard time seeing it. I mean, this movie also had a deleted scene with Baba Yaga in it, the witch that strides on a house that walks on chicken feet. Watching Luke Evans Dracula take on the Turks fighting fight Cenk Uygur and Hassan Piker to the death to keep Marxism from spreading through Transylvania almost makes up for the deceitful trailer. Yeah, because they do show the Baba Yaga scene, I do believe, in the trailer where he has to fight against or the witch Baba Yaga. So we then see him talking with his wife, and he goes to placate with Mehmed. He's like, or I will give you anything else, but do not ask that. And he's like, I need soldiers, brother. And Mehmed, you understand that this, or he calls him brother. They have a bond. He grew up in the Sultan's palace, but Mehmed was not the son that the Sultan wanted. Mehmed was basically the son, or his only tie to the Sultan was by blood. He was the blood son of the Sultan, where Vlad had his father's approval. Vlad had his father's love. All that Mehmet wanted was his father's love, but he gave that love to Vlad instead, as well as, sadly, other things as well, if I remember correctly. But anyway, yes, I do believe that Luke Evans fits the role better than Sam Worthington. Don't get me wrong, I like Sam Worthington as an actor. A lot of people don't, but I honestly think he did a good job in the movies that I've seen him play in. But I just don't see him as Dracula. And he tells him, he's like, I'm also going to take your son, and I will have the 1,000 boys. I don't need one more soldier. I need soldiers for multiple battles. So they're showing the scene of the carriage being drawn, kind of bleeding into that scene. He's like, please don't do this. And he's like, what is one son? If you're virile, you'll have more. And it's just completely dispassionate. And he then we're then at the scene where Morena and Ingress are being brought out to a neutral area where the Turks are going to take custody of Ingress. And Morena is telling him, what did I tell you the day you proposed to me? You said no. You told me that if I loved you, I should trust you, and I love you. And he tells her, then trust me. And his advisor, Kazan, Dracula's advisor, Kazan, is telling him it's either this or we start a war. You must think about what's best for your people. You can't think about what's just best for you. And that is, as cold-hearted as it is, true. If you are a leader of a freaking nation, you cannot just think about what is best for you. You have to think about what is best for your people. Even if that means fucking selling your kid off for peace. It sucks. That's the way it was back then. But in this case, Hamza Bey, the guy that was goading him in the throne room scene, goads him even more. He's like, we thought you would have put up a little bit more resistance, but whatever, you know what. And while Morena and Kazan are arguing in the background, and Ingress says, I'll do it. You can trust me and whatnot. When Vlad tells him, run to your mother, go, and then he just pulls out Hamza Bey's sword and slices off both of his fucking arms. It's like, oh shit, here we go. And we see him slaughter the other Turk guards that are there. And I love how he leaves one of them bent forward with the sword through his neck, stabs the dude through the neck, and puts the sword down so he could just kind of lean over like this, dead. It's like, oh shit. That's a little bit of Vlad the Impaler showing through there, you know? Now, Orange, did you prefer the complicated evil or tragic villain Dracula? Any villain, if they are complicated enough yet simple enough to understand that they are a villain. However, every villain feels that they are doing good. There is no absolute 100% evil that relishes in evil. I mean, those villains are nice and well done in certain cases, but it's few and far between. Dracula is a person that wanted to do what was best for his people, but also went mad in that he went back into his impaling ways. I really do think that this Dracula is one of the better Draculas because it shows the birth of Dracula as a vampire who has embraced what he had to become, which is down the road. So he then tells me, he's like, get back to the castle and prepare for a Turkish assault. They're like, where are you going? Whatever haunts Broken Tooth, I know it kills Turks. He goes back to the mountain where two guys got slaughtered, and he's looking for what was in there. And we get the bargain between him and the master vampire. Charles Dance, he's like, not many return to the grave or to a grave so willingly. And we learn that, or I love how Charles Dance plays this and how he touches the sword and goes like this down with the nails scratching along the blade, and then just like that, just as simple as that, flicking his finger sends this sword flying off. And then he's like, or he tells me, he's like, your silver ring is offends me, cloak it from my sight. It's a very original style way of talking, you know. He's very or freaking Charles Dance has that old way of talking, and he does it so well, kind of almost Shakespearean in a way. Has actually made a pretty good Castlevania Dracula, honestly. Charles would have been a brilliant death. Yeah, exactly. And he tells him, he's like, most people who come here reek of fear. In you, I smell hope. What man or what kind of man crawls into his grave in search of hope? A desperate one. And he starts goading him. He's like, Vlad Dracula, or Vlad Dracul, son of the devil. And he's like, you're wrong. It means son of the dragon. And all those people, and does your family know how many people you've killed? What was it? Hundreds? Yes. And then the almost bipolar way that Charles Dance plays this, where he grabs him by the throat, slams him up against a rock, and he says, lie to me again. I'll slit you from your belly to your brain and feed you your intestines. Literally drops that as a threat. And he's like, thousands. He corrects himself. Thousands. And when you put them to the stake, what did you feel? Shame, horror, power. And he yells to him to answer him, and he's like, nothing. I felt nothing. A greater crime than the act itself. And this whole dynamic, this whole conversation between them, when he's asked, then why spill blood if not for the pleasure of it? Because it's a great answer. Because men do not fear swords. They fear monsters. They run from them. By putting one village to the stake, I spared 10 more. Sometimes the world no longer needs a hero. Sometimes what it needs is a monster. And it's like, holy shit, that is a brilliant line. And I will fully admit, I stole that fucking line when I created a meme for Trump back in 2016, when I was fully ready to vote for him after the last debate between him and Clinton. It's like, sometimes the world no longer needs a president. Sometimes what the world needs is an asshole. Trump fit that perfectly. But yeah, complicated. I recall put in complete evil in the comment as a complete evil bastard with no good quality about them. Oh, sorry. Let me go back and reread that. Complete. Yep, I'm sorry. Complicated. I'm sorry. I did read that wrong. You're right. Right here, folks. Yeah, I read that. Complete evil or tragic villain. I do like complete evil. Again, it depends on your way of thinking, because even the Castlevania Dracula from the Netflix cartoon, he was willing to embrace all of his demonic power to bring to bear against those who wronged him. But again, he only did it because those people wronged him. So complete evil can also have a level of complexity in a way. Yes, I am sorry that I misread that, Neozoic. But a complete evil is very hard to pull off. You have to do it in a way that makes the character relatable only in at least one aspect, but not relatable to the point where you root for them, unless it is a story where you need to root for the villain, which is contradictory. So then we come to the bargain. He tells you, if I am your salvation, you are mine. And then he bites his wrist after smashing a skull, creating a kind of bowl, and he tells him, drink. And you will have a taste of my power, the strength of 100 men, the speed of a falling star. dominion over the night and all its creatures, to see and hear through their senses, even heal grievous wounds. And it's like, that's useful. Regan. I mean, it'd be like, I'd be drinking that in a heartbeat. And he tells him the price is the hunger for human blood will be unsatiable. And he doesn't tell him about how the sun will burn him or how silver will hurt him. But he tells him you have 3 days to save his people without drinking blood. For if you drink blood, the consequence will be as worse than if you had never walked in here. Basically, if he gives in, Master Vampire Charles Dance can walk out of that cave and wreak unimaginable terror upon the world in search of the one who tricked him. He would be seeking out the one who turned him. And he wouldn't care who gets in his way. Anybody who does get in his way would be dead. He would slaughter them. He has no qualms about doing it. Remember, he's been in a cave for centuries. This dude doesn't fucking care about anybody but himself and his vengeance. Pure evil. And if he is saying that it would, or the consequence if you drink and I'm allowed to be free, if that consequence is worse than never entering that cave, meaning the Ottomans take over and slaughter his people, well, he's talking about mass genocide of millions, maybe even tens of millions and hundreds of millions, where the Ottomans would have slaughtered probably about 1 million, maybe 10 million max before they eventually got stopped. But anyway, and he's like, what? Or this is the ultimate game, you know? The game to last 3 days to save his people without drinking blood. The consequence, if he feeds the Master Vampire, will be released from his cave to take vengeance on the one who turned him, and then will force Vlad to heal. Light versus dark, hope versus despair, and the world's fate hangs in the balance. And then when he drinks, he dies and somehow ends up outside of the cave, back down by the river. And we get a sense of Vlad quickly learning that he can hear a lot of minuscule things around him. And he's hearing a spider, and it sounds like metal or ice slashing across metal, or metal even slashing across ice. And it's a spider that's wrapping up a prey in its web. He can hear dogs yipping as they're hunting a deer, and the deer making noises as well. He sees, with the brief glow in his eyes, the animal reddish glow. Instead of a normal whitish glow from animals, you get a more reddish glow in his eyes, where he can see the blood pumping through these animals, and it's more like echolocation. It's like really pulsing like this all the way through the scene, completely black. It's very cool. And he's like, that's useful. He notices that his ring is burning him, so he pulls it off and drops it down into the water. However, he picks it back up because it starts a very high-pitched ringing in his ears. He looks up, seeing through the clouds, seeing the night sky so clearly and the stars beyond. It's like, holy shit, man. So we then see him starting to run because he hears the explosions of the Turks' assault on Castle Dracula. Because remember, he sent corpses back to the Sultan instead of the Sultan, or instead of 1,000 boys and the prince's son. Well, 1,000 Turkish soldiers were sent against Castle Dracula to destroy it. And he's running, and suddenly he starts turning into bats. I love how he's like, whoa, kind of just lurches forward like this, like he has no idea what the hell is going on, turns into the bats, and the bats suddenly fly forward, and he turns back into himself, and he's like, "Well, that's interesting." It's like, cool. He's learning. I love how it's not just he automatically is master of these powers. He's learning them as quickly as he has to understand how to use these to best effect. And that is one of the coolest things about this movie is he doesn't just, there you go. No, he has to learn them. And I love how they do it. How do you compare Luke's Dracula role with his other roles, such as Bard the Bowman from The Hobbit, Emmett Fields from The Raven? I never saw that. Aramis from The Three Musketeers, 2011. I never saw that. But compared with Bard the Bowman, I thought that it was a very similar, yet not similar role. Something smells good downstairs. But it's essentially a man who cares for his loved ones is willing to fight a war if he has to keep them safe. It's very similar, or his role as Dracula is very similar to Bard the Bowman. So he goes down and he helps, or he rallies his people, and he tells them, I will negotiate with them and I will stop them if I have to. And he goes out and he takes on 1,000 Turks and he slaughters them. And I love how he is, or how they cover it. And the final bit of it shows how he stabs a Turk. And as the Turk is going down, you see the reflection of the sword, him just going around slaughtering other Turks in the reflection of the sword. It is such a great effect. And then you see him walking up, grabbing the sword from the Ottoman, or from the Turk's eyes, and you hear the growling, the demonic growling that he has as he's laying waste to them all. And then as you see the Turk's head, or you see his vision just turn up towards the full moon, you see Turks flying around, getting tossed around, and then you see one Turk land on the dude, and you hear him, and you hear, ugh, and he's dead. And then you see a great cinematography in this scene where you see it from sky view downward. And it's a circle, just concentric circles, wider and wider, of how he slaughtered all those Turks. 1,000 Turks dead. He left one alive to tell the tale. And there's a deleted scene for that specific General Ishmael, who was actually supposed to go to Transylvania to make sure that his orders are carried out, or the Sultan's orders are carried out. His name was Ishmael. Well, in the deleted scene, or after Vlad goes back to his people who are now coming out ready to fight, and he's like, do not ask me what happened here tonight. Only know that I will use all the power I have to protect my people. And we cannot stay here. We will all flee to Kozia Monastery. The Turks cannot wage war there with their heavy cannons. Cannon fire is basically useless there. So as they're fleeing, the Sultan arrives after he heard that Vlad just killed 1,000 of his men. Send 10,000 or send 100,000. I'll lead them myself. And then he arrives there, and he sees, or in the movie, you see him, or you hear Ishmael say a message from Prince Vlad. He says, or I hope you enjoy the view. And then you see just all of the men that Vlad killed are now impaled, Vlad the Impaler style. Where in the deleted scene, there's two deleted scenes. One where Vlad hypnotizes Ishmael, And then the scene where he gives him the message. And he orders him to attack the Sultan, but also to tell him a story. Remember that time in your father's palace when a storm came? I had always seen them, or I had always known storms. You had never done so. Do you still cry at night, or do you still cry when it rains? Basically taunting the Sultan. And then he gets up and asks him, and then tries to kill him, and the Sultan ends up killing his general, Ishmael. He's like, there you go. So, let's see here. We see Mehmed angered at this. So then we see Vlad eating, and he's getting uncomfortable. So he leaves that area, and he goes into his tent where he starts getting it on with his wife. And one of the things is, during the scene, what you think might turn into a full-fledged sex scene, as she's feeling his back, this is a man who had his back whipped and scarred to shit, man. His back would look like freaking chicken scratch all over a chalkboard. Well, as she's actually holding his back, she's like, her eyes kind of squint like, what the hell? I'm not feeling any of his scars. But then she turned her neck, and he starts seeing the vein. And he's constantly hearing the master vampire saying, free me, feed, drink. So he pulls back out of that, and she's like, what is it? He's like, I need some air. It's like, dude, you don't freaking get your wife hot to trot like that and not give her some satisfaction. I'm just saying. But anyway, understandable why he leaves. And he then hears somebody behind him, and he's like, I can hear you behind me. I don't know why you're following me. He's like, I'm not following you. I'm following them. Points up to the bats that are flying around. And it's the same gypsy guy that found the Turkish helmet in the beginning of the movie. And he tells him that he wants to serve him, and he cuts open his hand with a knife and fills a cup, and Vlad shoves the cup aside and says, stay the fuck away from me. And the guy's like, yes, master. He's like one of those little Igor motherfuckers. Yes, master. And then hides behind the tree. Gotta drink because the way I said master. So the next scene is where he or Morena learns the truth by seeing him struggle or whimpering in his sleep. She pulls off the blanket and sees all of his scars are gone, and then sees that he's wearing his silver ring on his chest, and it's burning his chest, so she pulls it off. And as he sits up, she's like, your scars are gone. What's happening to you? She knows. Now, the chemistry between Sarah Gadon and Luke Evans is so freaking great in this movie. You actually believe these two love each other and are freaking married to each other in such a tragic way. And it's like, or he tells her the truth. I am what men fear on Broken Tooth, not a ghost. And then he cuts open a hole in the tent, which allows the sun to bleed through and starts burning his skin. Now, the way that it comes off is that as it touches his skin, or the sun touches his skin, you see the skin peeling off of his body in almost like particles-sized waves. And that is such a great effect. I mean, the special effects that they did in this movie are quite good. It's just that there's a little bit problem with the story, you know? So, so then he's like, I need you, or I can't go out in the sun, and I have to hold out for 3 days. Otherwise, I become this for eternity. And she says, you will undo this, won't you? And he's like, yes, after I stop, but I have to stop the Turks in 3 days. Otherwise, we all die. You know? Uh, Fun question. If Luke Evans was cast as a DC Marvel character, hero or villain, which character would fit with Luke Evans, in your opinion? He has a playfulness and joyfulness around him in some ways that he can really play very well. I think that he could actually, or I think that he would have actually made a good Flash. I honestly think he would have made a good Flash. Or somebody even, or if a villain, I think that he would probably be a good young Doctor Doom, or actually a very good Doctor Doom, or not young, because he does have the movement. He can portray the ego. He can portray the coldness and calculativeness of somebody who is willing to erase a world to preserve the world that he is a part of. Which Flash? Garrick? Barry Allen? I believe that Garrick would be a good choice for him as a Flash. Barry Allen and Wally West are, I believe, redheads. Or Wally West is a redhead, but Barry, he might do a good Barry Allen, but I think that Jay Garrick would be the best Flash for him. Now, we then get to Morena's telling his friend Dimitru that they need to move and that he will join them after he's going to scout ahead. And the Turks start closing in on the caravan of refugees. And I love how Vlad is waiting and just pacing in his tent and also makes an effort to avoid the sun at all costs. And the second the sun goes down beneath the clouds on the horizon, he uses the bats to fly out really quickly. It is, I mean, if they would have one editing choice I would have made in this scene is the second that the sun goes down and they show the tent, you see the bats just flying out. You don't take a beat, you just see them blasting out of there the second that sun goes down to show that this man is not wasting even a second to get to his family because he knows the Turks are going to be there. And those Turks are there slicing up the people as they run along, and then he manages to save his family at the last second. And his son doesn't see it. Morena is cornered by Bright Eyes, and she tells Ingress to run. And Dimitru was stabbed by the Turk, but he's still just hanging on to life. And then we see Vlad flying around as the bats, and then scares Bright Eyes off a cliff by coming at him and snarling at him with the vampire face, right off the cliff. So Dimitru sees this just before he dies, and he's backing away from Vlad, like, what the fuck are you, And he tries to comfort him just before he dies, but then his son gets there, so he's like, the hell, man? How'd you get here so quick? So they finally get to the monastery. Now, there is a scene in the monastery where Ingress is looking at a door that is sealed shut. Now, also, you hear Vlad talking in the background and this light cascading through the monastery or through a porthole on the top. Now, I'm thinking that's sunlight, but Vlad walked through it without pain. And it's like, what's wrong with this scene here, bub? It's a small error, that's how I see it. It is a very small error. So he goes and his son asks him, what's in there? And he tells him, something I wish to never use, or something I hope I never have to use ever again. And it's his armor. What's in there is the armor of the Impaler, the dragon. So the monk, the next day, as dawn is going over, he sees Vlad walking out with some men, and Vlad stops before he walks into the sunlight. And he sees that the monk is watching him, and he nods to the monk, and he then is dodging the sunlight in as he goes into the weapons tent. Well, the monk decides to confront him, and he's like, "Let me kill you now, or Silver and the sun harm you, but yet the Holy Cross has no hold over you, which means you have yet to seal your fate into the curse. Let me kill you, my prince, please." Well, Vlad tells him, it's like, you do better to run. What I would have said is, I have the will to, or I am willfully holding back this curse, or I'm using it only to protect my people, and then it will be gone. And then have the monk not listen and slice open the tent. But instead, he's like, you do better to run, brother. And so he then slices open the tent, and you see the sun rush in and start burning his face as he starts screaming. And everybody, or all of his people, are seeing this, and the place starts burning, and they all start reacting. He's a monster, and whatnot. And Morena sees this. She's like, oh shit. She knows what's about to happen. She knows what's wrong with her husband. She knows that he's kind of a monster. And she tells one of her subjects, take Ingress to his room. Do not let him see what's about to happen. Well, they get close to the room, and they get close to the inside to close the door, but they don't get inside to close the door. And while this is happening, Vlad uses his powers to create a black cloud to block out the sun. And he walks out of the burning tent. And you see the burns all over his face. And he's like, this is your loyalty? I mean, this is your loyalty, your gratitude? You fools. You think you're alive because you can fight? And then he grabs a burning piece of wood, and he's like, you're alive because of me, because of what I did to save you. He's ready to fucking slaughter his own people because they turned on him so quickly. That scene is so freaking powerful because it shows that that curse is, or reacts in part to his rage. He's willing to kill them for turning on him. And most princes and leaders would do that. It's like, you want to turn on me? I'll freaking slaughter you right here. That's the price of that's the price of your betrayal. But Morena goes up and calms him. It's like, this is not who you are. And he calms down after his face is fully healed. And then they both see that Ingress saw the whole fucking thing. And it's like, well, shit, can't hide that anymore. You know? It's like, fuck, son saw it, damn it. So we see him praying to God, asking him for the strength to hold this curse back for one more day to protect his people. And then Ingress comes in, and he's like, are you sick? And he's like, is this power, or is... I love the simplicity of Ingress and how it's simple. His father's sick, and he's praying for God, or God will help him if he is faithful enough. It is just really that simple for him. But then he sees that the power, or that the Turks are on their way, and that however, Mehmed knows that he has powers. Vlad is somehow using dark magic against him. And he's like, well, they can't, or my men won't fear what they can't see. And he blindfolds all of his soldiers and marches them towards the monastery. And it's like, okay, man, yeah, now. And So we also hear the last or a nice little discussion between Morena and Vlad, and you know what their wedding vow is. Why think separately of this life and the next when one is born from the last? It is a very beautiful limerick, so to speak, from a poem or of a poem. And you see, or you hear, or you then see him going down to get ready to lead the men, so to speak. And then he's like, as dawn comes, my powers are gone. Well, then he sees the bats flying and he remembers that he has dominion over these creatures. So he goes up to the tower where the bats are coming in and he sticks his hands up, calling on all the bats. You see bats all around flying to go up around him. And you also see the Turkish scouts stealthily climbing up that mountain to get to the monastery ahead of the army, to do as much damage as you can before the army gets in to lay full siege. And it's bats, lots of bats. Now, he then manages to get all of the bats up, and then he also searches the army and finds Mehmed there. So he's going full bore after Mehmed as he launches the bats. He puts his hand forward and the bats just start smashing. And that scene is so freaking great, man, where he's using the bats to fight the war, and he's slaughtering hundreds of the Turks in a few moments. Orange, I heard people say that this is the closest thing to get to a Castlevania Lords of Shadow movie. Do you agree or disagree? I have not seen Castlevania Lords of Shadow or played Castlevania Lords of Shadow, so I wouldn't know in this case. I'm sorry, Nizok. And then he uses, or I love how the bats kind of follow the movement of his hand as he turns his hand like this, as he lifts his hand, and the bats start spiraling above. He lifts his hand up, creates a fist. You see the bats mimic it, and then he brings it down like a hammering fist of a demon down upon the whole Turkish army. And so, looks like I'm getting a small internet problem here. Am I still coming in clearly, folks? Let me know. So, let's see here. There we go. There, that should help. And let's see here, just making sure. Let me get rid of this window because I no longer need it. Close. There. So he then goes after Mehmet. After he does the slam down with the fist, he goes after Mehmet and realizes that the person there is not Mehmet. The person in the armor of the Sultan is actually a decoy. And he sees that Mehmed is being protected by a wall of Turkish soldiers, and he is in common soldier armor. It's a brilliant deception. And as he is down there about to go after Mehmed, he hears Morena and his son are being menaced by the Turk, or by Bright Eyes and the other member that is there. I can't remember his name. So he immediately goes there to stop them, knocking them out, knocking one as one grabs Ingerus, takes him away, the other is launched off the platform by Vlad and using the bats, but Morena is hanging off the edge. And we get the fall scene where he's chasing after Morena in the fall, where she has her arms out like this and she's not reacting. Now, honestly, if she would have reacted a little bit more, kind of like shown that she had fear in her eyes, or she looked down or in some sort of scared way, it would have been a much greater scene where it also shows him trying to reach her, and Ingerus sees them land, and that's when the Sultan pulls away with Ingerus in tow, and the army withdraws, or as the army or the rest of his army sweeps in, starts killing off his citizens. Well, it's almost dawn, and she tells him, "You need to save our son." And he's like, "I can't." And she's like, "Drink blood." So she tells him, "Drink the blood. Save our son. Make sure he's safe." Would you compare Dracula X Morena romance from Untold with Oldman's Elizabeth Amina, played by Winona Ryder, romance from Bram Stoker's Dracula? How would I compare them? Well, Morena has a reincarnation of Mina, so it's essentially the same thing. However, I would see that it is a lot more where Elisabetta killed herself with false news of his demise. It's more tragic in Oldman's case, or it's tragic in Oldman's case, where he sees her dead in a church, but it's even more tragic as Vlad actually has to kill his wife in order to embrace the curse and become a full-fledged vampire. And when she says, "Drink my blood, do it now," it cuts back to the master vampire in the cave, turning his head slightly as in, "Oh, is he finally going to do it?" And he knows very well that Vlad is about to do this, because he's getting up and he's walking to the edge of the cage or the cave, knowing he's going to be able to leave it. He is doing it with surety. So yes, when Vlad is screaming out in anguish, now that that he had just killed his wife and embraced this curse, it's even worse because now the master vampire has been let loose. And he then goes into the town where there are survivors, and he's like, "Do you want revenge?" And some of them are looking at him, and he allows them to drink from his wrist, and he turns them all into vampires, including Kazan, his advisor. That bastard Kazan. But we then get the cut to the Turkish army, and he's like, "The sun should have risen," or look to the east, "The sun should have risen by now." But it's a humongous storm with lightning casting down upon the sky, and it's just building and building. Now that he is full-fledged vampire, he has a greater control of it now. He is now he has basically become death, and he has just unleashed his entire thrall of remaining citizens of Transylvania onto the Turkish army, and they're all vampire full-fledged as well. And they're all going after and killing a bunch of people, turning into bats, stopping themselves from being killed and whatnot. And the Bright Eyes, that Turkish scout that kidnapped Ingerus, is cutting down some of them, and then sees Vlad in his Dracula armor. And as he's walking by calmly, somebody goes in front of the camera, and then Dracula's gone. And he's like, And then he sees him there again, and he grabs the blade from the guy and just stabs him up against a pillar, and lets the kid that he threatened earlier in the throne room kill Bright Eyes. He then gets into the main tent, and it's now Dracula versus Mehmed. You also, or before that, you also see Kazan, or Dracula's advisor, say to one of the generals, I thought there was too many of you before I thought there was too many of you. Now there's not enough. And he just starts ripping into him. And you then see the fight between Mehmed and Dracula. Now, there's some bad cinematography in here because they have what's known as the hip cam, where they put the thing around your waist and have the camera right here in front of your face to record your reactions. And as you move around like this, it causes a chaotic movement, but focuses on your face. They had a couple of shots with that because Mehmed filled the entire room with silver, because he somehow realizes that Vlad has a weakness for silver. That is never explained how he knows this. He doesn't, they never explained it, how he knew this. That was one of the big problems of this. Somehow, the Sultan knows that Vlad fears silver, has a weakness for it because of the vampire, or his vampire nature. And he uses it to effect and whatnot. And he's also forcing Ingress to watch. And the battle goes pitched one way, pitched another way, but ends up having Vlad on the ground and Mehmed about to stake him with wooden stake. And one of the things I really do like here is as the stake is going, let's see here. I'll use this implement here. As the stake is going closer to his chest, you see his armor disintegrating. The wood hasn't even touched him, and yet he is starting to disintegrate. It's trying to retreat from the wood, but you also see it starting to form into bat wings, so you know what's about to happen. And he does end up turning into a bat, lifting up the Sultan, turning it or grabbing the stake and then shoving it straight into his chest after he says goodbye, Lord Impaler. And he's then stabs him and he's like, that is no longer my name. My name is Dracula, son of the devil. And then he feeds on him, ripping his throat, and then throws him across the room and saving his son. Now, you think that might be the end of it. Well, no, he goes out. And he sees that his thrall of vampires are still feeding on any last survivors and whatnot. And he sees Kazan come up to him. He's like, you old goat. And he's like, I don't feel old. And he's like, how many are left? None, except for your son, of course. What have I told you repeatedly, time and time again? That a prince must do what is right by his people. And all this time, you realize that they're about to turn on him. And they want to feed, or they can't control their thirst. All of these vampires can't control their thirst. They're in a bloodlust right now. They are bloodthirsty beyond control. And you see some of them are trying to get to Ingress, trying to call him over to him and whatnot. And when Kazan's like, when he's gone, you'll be free. And then he charges him. Well, Vlad grabs a spear or stabs Kazan. He says, you forget what I am. And lifts him up and sets the stake as he's struggling and disintegrating because of the stake in the heart, or because of the piercing his heart. And the effects of Kazan's death, where he's been killed by heart pierce, is pretty cool. How his body just kind of rips itself apart, or pieces of it is ripping itself off of him until he disintegrates. and all the other vampires are looking at him like, we're going to kill you now. But then they all start retreating because the monk from earlier comes in with a cross. And I love how, from a vampire's POV, when they show you silver in a vampire's POV in this movie, it's kind of the silver is shiny but blurry. However, if you bring a cross into the mix to a vampire, it's casting off light, even though it's not in real life. To a vampire, you're seeing something that is that will burn your eyes merely in the presence of it. It's called, or basically, holy light from this cross. And this is a monk who has exceptional faith that a mere cross is holding back an entire legion of vampires. And he's begging for Ingress to come with him. And his father tells him, you have to go with him now. I will. But Ingress doesn't want to leave, but he tells him go. And then he tells him, you take care of him. He tells them, or he makes that final request to the monk. It is a very hard, emotional scene, because your son doesn't want to leave you, but you also know the only way to protect him is to kill not only those around you, but yourself too, because you got to let the sun in. So he looks up at the sky and he says, he's safe now, Morena. And then he takes his hands like this, spreads them out, and the sky opens up, allowing the sun through to kill all the vampires he had just turned. And you see him bald as he's burning, with one final look at his son. And he then looks up at the sun and screams out and finally collapses. So as his son is now made king in the next scene and narrates that the Turks lost and that their armies were defeated, there's no celebration, and Dracula, his father, is no longer respected or is not celebrated for being one of the heroes of this war. There are no pictures. All the silver that is or that bears Vlad's face is melted down. He is seen as a monster, which was the unfortunate truth of which is the truth of history too. Vlad Tepes was an impaler. He slaughtered people. He went mad in real life. But in this movie, he is a hero. But also what they don't, or they cut to that gypsy guy pulling his burning carcass into a tent and feeding him blood. And I love how the blood goes into his mouth, he immediately starts around his mouth regenerating and and reconstituting as the guy feeds him blood. And then we jump to the future, or our present, and he's walking among everybody, and then he hears a very familiar voice behind him, and he looks, and it's Morena, Sarah Gadon. However, it's definitely not her. And he approaches her, and he is like, beautiful. The flowers are beautiful. And she's like, thank you, and whatnot. And he says, my lady. And she's like, my lady, where are you from? Far from here. And so as she's like, well, good evening or good night. And as she's walking away, he recites the poem that their wedding vows was. What's the same from this life or the next when one is born from the last? And she stops, turns around. She's like, that's my favorite poem. And he tells her, it speaks to you of yearning, of a love unfulfilled. And you then cut to Charles Dance over there tapping his vampiric nails and watching them as she introduces herself as Mina. And he introduces himself as Vlad, and they are walking off, and he gets up to walk behind him and says, "Let the games begin." And that's the end of the movie. Now, is this movie perfect by any sense? No. There's a lot of things that the trailer screwed up because the trailer showed things that were not put in the movie or even in the deleted scenes, except for the Baba Yaga scene. There was that bit of a scene. But also, you get scenes that were not in there very much. And then you also get plot points that were not fully covered, like how does the prince learn of his weakness for silver? It doesn't make sense. You have some bad cinematography in a couple of areas. I hate the waist cam because the waist cam just doesn't do good or just doesn't work very well, in my opinion. It's too chaotic of movement for when he's screaming, when Silver's all being or thrown all around him and whatnot. However, I do like the story. There are writing issues. Objectively, I would put this movie at about an 8. It passes. It's great, or it's a good story. It's got good special effects. However, there are problems with it. There are gaps, plot holes, and such. Like, why does this gypsy motherfucker know about vampires and shit as well? It's weird that this movie is the only movie where Gary Shore directed because he has no other feature-length movie after Untold. Although I heard that Gary is making a horror movie about RMS Queen Mary. Interesting. So, Royal Majesty Service Queen Mary. I'm guessing that's the boat. But subjectively, I put this movie at about a 9. It's got good bones. However, I wish there was something to continue from it. Because this movie does leave you wanting more. This movie really does leave you wanting more. However, I also do acknowledge that there are certain things that really do bother or that were poorly done, like the waist camera and the writing. I do acknowledge even those don't take off as many points as an objective score, but subjectively, it still does take off a little bit. Moviegoer, is this movie entertaining? Does this movie get you from A to B in a nice, entertaining fashion? Yes. So this movie is about a 9.5 to a 10, moviegoer-wise. And that will conclude the romance mystery reviews, as tomorrow is a new month. And it will be March. So the themes for the mystery reviews next month, a week from now, will be the first one, will be either green or Irish themes. So the first hint for next week's mystery review is trees. Think green, folks. Think green and trees, and what could it possibly be? I will give more hints as the week progresses. And thank you so much to Neozoic for being so active in the chat. Epime, always good to see you. Junebugs, always great to see you. Vanja, thank you for sticking through. Cult Classic Cage, thank you for sticking through. Who else? And that, I do believe, is all those who talked in the comment section and the chat. Folks, if you like this video, y'all know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, share, all that jazz. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. What did you think of Dracula Untold? Did you like it? Did you not? What was your favorite part? What was your least favorite part? Let me know all that stuff down in the comment section below, folks. This has been Orange Hat Reviews. Have a wonderful day, and always remember, stay humble.